Mac Miller. When I heard of this album release, I was really excited. The album called Circles. And Mac Miller was one of those artists that I come to know in much later times. And he's one of those artists that has transcended what I think is a typical rapper, right? And if you listen to his old Swimming album, or the previous Swimming album, and Circles, obviously, you know, it's almost like a question of, and rest in peace, Mac Miller. Are these albums really hip hop? And I mean, one could argue that they're not, but for me, I would definitely call them hip hop. But I would say that they've definitely transcended what would be typically known as a hip hop album. They transcend into all these other genres. And Circles is one of those albums that definitely transcends what we typically know as hip hop. But that can lead you into a question of what makes an album truly hip hop. Is it the sound? Is it the artist? You know, and I think Mac Miller is one of those people that, if you go back in his history, right, there's some artists that feel like industry plants. There's some artists that feel phony and fake. But when you hear Mac Miller's current album, Circles, you don't even know, like, the sound is a cross between hip hop, a cross between just lounge, coffee, house, you know, hipster, quote unquote, even sometimes gospel style sound. But if you go back to Mac Miller's first days, he's like a straight up rapper. And he rarely, I would say, raps in this album. And even though he doesn't really rap that much in the Circles album, this album to me is one of those albums that I think could go on to win a Grammy and go on to really conclude, you know, Mac Miller's great legacy. And whether it's going to conclude, that has yet to be seen. But it's one of those albums that has a lot, you know, to it. And, you know, when I turned it on, you know, at nighttime, and I found, like, before I was sleeping, and I found that it kind of, I don't want to say put me to bed, but I just really just vibed to it. Like, I felt sort of like in this like trance, you know, to the Mac Miller album. It's something about his voice, his sound. It's something about the production quality, the style of the production. And now I don't know, it could be that perhaps Mac Miller wasn't around. He obviously wasn't around, but I don't know if he had the chance to truly like refine the album, or these were like kind of like cuts of tracks that he had left behind that he still wanted to, you know, refine. And maybe a producer had to take it upon themselves to, you know, refine the tracks. And maybe if Mac Miller was still around, there would be more to it. But despite that, Circles is an album that I think has a lot to say about life, has a lot to say about, you know, if we look at the state of hip hop, you know, with the murder of XXX Tentacion, with the passing of Juice WRLD through what is allegedly an overdose of opioids, drugs, or painkiller medication, something like that. I can't remember the exact one. You know, with the passing of Lil Peep over drugs, just so many artists. And Mac Miller was one of those artists. And Mac Miller passed due to, you know, one of these, you know, drug overdoses, but it was like one of those things where I think he was trying to get high, and again, this is all alleged, I don't speak on this that much, but he passed because the drug was, you know, not the drug that it was supposed to be, and it had something else in it, some, you know, fentanyl overdose. So Mac Miller, it's like he speaks on what the state of life, the feeling of, you know, what is the meaning of life, you know, and like the pain that people go through. And how do you resolve that pain? And how do you basically take life for what it is and balance it out, like for what we know of the evil, and balance it out for the good? And I want to do like, you know, a track by track review of Mac Miller's Circles album. When I just turned this on, I just couldn't believe it, what I was going to hear. How many, you know, rap songs or rap albums do you know will start like this, the way Circles starts? And just the way that starts, it lets you know that this album is on a whole other level. It almost feels like when you listen to Mac Miller, it almost feels like Mac Miller's looking down on us, you know. teaching us about life. And in the circles, he says, well, this is what it looked like right before you fall. Stumbling around, you've been guessing your direction. Next step, you can't see at all. I don't have a name. I don't have a name. Who am I to blame? Who am I to blame, though? And I cannot be changed. Trust me, drawing circles, watching the world falling. Down is decline, and I can keep you safe. I mean, he goes on like to discuss like the pain and the stress of life, and I like the I know like NBA Youngboy had this metaphor of drawing symbols where he was like feeling the pain of life and like drawing when you I feel like draw to distract yourself. But Mac Miller in his explanation of drawing a circle. Circles is like a track that kind of just gets turned on, and it's just like an introduction of what this is gonna be sound. Then Complicated comes in and it kind of raises your mood a bit. So in Complicated, the beat gets raised, the mood gets raised, and the verse goes, outside is cloudy, but I like that better. Behind the wheel, but still I ain't on my way. Some people say they want to live forever. That's way too long. I'll just get through today. And the song goes on, to talk about that, that feeling, right? Like where we plan our futures, and Mac Miller is saying, it's so hard to plan the future. Let's just focus on today so we don't get stressed out in life. And it's kind of interesting, to hear someone like Mac Miller talk about this, because he's achieved such success and notoriety over his music. You would imagine that someone has really thought through or planned their life to get there. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe they get through there through the everyday. So maybe that's like Mac Miller's way of telling us, focus on today. Don't get yourself stressed out. Don't make life so complicated. And I don't know, it's just, to me, I love that, I just love that. I love what he's trying to say there, and it's something that he goes on in verse 3. Inside my head is getting pretty cluttered. I try but can't clean up the mess. For I start to think about the future first. Can I please get through a day? And that's something a lot of people can relate to, just getting through the day, getting through one day at a time. Mac Miller. Let's go to the next track. Again, Blue World keeps that like complicated, sound, dun, 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 and a little more upbeat. It's trippy. It's a trippy album. It's a trippy song. It's just this overall trippy vibe that you get. No trippy, no red. So with Blue World, it sounds like a song where he's talking about the craziness of life, the craziness of the world that we face. And he goes and he calls it, it's a blue world without you, it's a blue world alone. A blue, everybody knows like blue, like sad. And almost this whole album almost feels like blues, jazz kind of sound, blues kind of vibe. Maybe you could call this like rap blues. But it's just his depiction of life being insane. Well, this mad world made me crazy, might just turn around and do 180. I ain't politicking, I ain't kiss no babies. The devil on my doorstep, being so shady. Don't trip. We don't gotta let him in. Don't trip. I let it go, but I never go with it. I love this song. Is just about again the craziness of the world, just trying to keep up. Trying to keep up, trying to like not fall through. Everything that you see like fall through the cracks, fall through what's crazy out there. Maintain, but it's still a crazy world because we have to kind of deal with all this stuff in our society, and it's just I think it's just amazing for a rap artist. If he was still alive, I think there's so much that could be done with this, Like you see this upliftment of hip hop where we have now people making, musical productions on Broadway like Hamilton. I think Mac Miller could have, transcended a lot of these things and done so much more with his music. It's sad that he's passed, but I'm glad that the family has left us with this music. The next song, Good News, again, is very similar. It's all a lot of the same stuff where it's like in life, we want, everyone wants to hear good news, but you don't always have good news. It's not something that you could always have. It's something good and positive. Sometimes it's going to be, negative, and how do we deal with that is what Mac Miller is trying to tell us. Good News is one of those songs that has such a good vibe to it, and again, it's like just again him kind of talking to himself, just trying to like debate on how to stay up and how to stay through life and how to stay positive without falling through, and just going through like just what's in his head. He says a lot of things I regret, but I just say I forget. Why can't it just be easy? Why does everybody need me to stay? Got the cards in my hand. I hate dealing. I wish that I could just get out my goddamn way. What is there to say? There ain't no better time than today. You know, it's just so poetic. Mac Miller, it's just such a poetic song. Good News is just a vibe. These are all good songs that could just be listened to when you're just chilling. The song I Can See is not my favorite of it because Mac Miller goes into this really like, what I see, this sounds like this whole other genre, very kind of like almost gospel type sound, and it's not my vibe. But again, it's the same thing. It's just, you know, talking about you know, what you see in life. Again, in the middle of the album, I Can See everybody, he gets really singy, and it's not like, I'm not crazy about it, but I accept it as being part of the album. But it's not the favorite, you know, my favorite parts of the album. Because I like that Mac Miller, that kind of still on the cusp of transcending that, you know, what we know as the hip hop sound, but not going too far. Woods is another nice song that just has a steady beat. You know, you just hear Mac Miller just kind of like sound like giving his thoughts out and just, you know, talking about life again. But I like in Spotify the animation that they have for the song. It's really sick. Let me see if you can see this right here. But it's really cool. I love how they're doing that. And that's the song Woods. This is Hand Me Downs, and check out the animation on Spotify. You know, I'm gonna pause here. I mean, the album is amazing, and there's not much to say except that, check it out. It's one of those albums, again, you could listen to all the time. He's kind of saying very similar things in all these different kind of sounds and melodies that are just super smooth and jazzy and relaxed and you know, just super smooth. So check it out. I like the last song on the album. I love the way it ends. Mac Miller, thank you for giving us this Circles album. Thank you to the family that's brought us this Circles album, because it's definitely definitely I can see it as a part 2 to the Swimming album. I think even Circles kind of took it to this whole other genre that I think Swimming kind of still stuck in a lot of the, you know, the hip hop vibe, but then Circles kind of just really like went to another level. And again, it makes you question what's true hip hop. But I think when you follow an artist and the artist starts off in hip hop, and if their album transcends what they typically do, I think it's okay that it stays within the genre and they transcend. That's something common. Like you might talk about, you know, like a Bob Marley, right? Bob Marley we all know as reggae, and we all know his roots. But as Bob Marley kept making albums and albums, you know, he's transcended the common reggae sound, right? To the point where he produced music that anybody could listen to, even if you're cross genre, even if you're like in any other genre, anyone like knows Bob Marley. And I think the point is, at some point, you know, an artist can transcend, and I think you could still call it hip hop because of the artists themselves, because of the spirit of the artist. And that transcendence of the album doesn't take away from hip hop. Actually, it gives back to hip hop, that it shows people that this music came from hip hop, that it's not another genre, that this album is still the hip hop genre. Not that it takes away, and not that this is something that now is no longer hip hop. And I don't think that's fair to do, because this kind of music shows you, like, Bob Marley is still reggae, right? Mac Miller is still hip hop. It's not something that, it's not fair for people to try to take that away and say, okay, now Mac Miller is pop, because he's not. So that's how I look at it, and that's my metaphor of, look at it like Bob Marley. Look at it similar to Drake, you know, where you just, you know, you can, you know, Drake does have a way of staying within hip hop because he keeps like half of his album very rappy. But again, it shows the world that this is what hip hop is, not that it moves away from hip hop. Alright guys, hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe. Rest in peace to Mac Miller. Comment below, tell me what you think of the Mac Miller Circles album. I'm gonna have this on stream, repeat all the time when I'm laying in bed, relaxing. Just if I'm doing anything, you know, at work or whatever, you can just have this album on without being distracted too much. Rest in peace, Mac Miller.